It is game day eve for the BYU football program, but it feels a little anticlimactic.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, coming up on today's show, we're talking about BYU and Portland State and exactly why I said I think it's anticlimactic to have this as the season opener for BYU. We'll get into that. Then we're going to make some bold predictions for the season ahead. Yes, I'm going to put receipts out there that you guys can pull and throw back in my face at the end of the year when inevitably some of them are wrong. And we'll finish up today's show with our weekly Insiders Group mailbag. We'll throw it open, answer as many questions as are in the mailbag, and let you guys have your say on the podcast. It's all brought to you today by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right. So the reason I say this is a bit of an anticlimactic day for me, from my vantage point, is that BYU and Portland State looks like a mismatch of mismatches. BYU is a fringe top 25 team, and with Boise State getting absolutely demolished by USF, should BYU handle their business, in theory, they should move up at least the one spot because they're the first team outside the top 25, which Boise State currently occupies in the AP top 25 poll. And BYU, in theory, should be inside the top 25 come Tuesday when the next AP rankings come out with the long weekend. The bigger point is that I look at this matchup as an ideal matchup for Bear Bachmeier to settle in at quarterback for BYU. You could not have picked maybe a better game to put a first-time freshman starting quarterback at the Power 4 level against than the Portland State Vikings. And it's nothing against PSU. It's just that Barnum, speaking of Bruce Barnum, their head coach, he has got a team that's not what it once was. I look back, and I've had some people point this out to me. Remember 2017, Jake, Tanner Mangum was taken over as the full-time starter for BYU, and they were supposed to really take off and really show us what they had in that opener against Portland State, and ended up being a slog, a 20-6 victory that ultimately proved to be the canary in the coal mine on what is maybe the worst single season in the last 50 years of BYU football. That's what that 2017 game did. But that 2017 Portland State team, infinitely better than this year's Portland State team, at least from my vantage point. Barney Ball has got its place, and Bruce Barnum's done a really, really good job. It's crazy to think that both he and Kalani Sitake, they're matching wits once again because they were the head coaches in 2017 when these two teams played. But I look at this as it's a perfect opportunity for Bear Bachmeier to settle in here at the helm of BYU's offense. But knowing the way that Kalani Sitake operates these games with FCS opponents, that let's say they get up by 30 points in the first quarter and a half, or if it gets just out of hand really early, I do not believe for a second that Kalani Sitake is going to do what Lavelle Edwards or the coaches have done in the past and run it to 50-0. Or I remember there was an 83-7 game at one point. I think it's the biggest margin of victory in BYU football history. It was an 83-7 pasting of UTEP back in the 80s. That's not Kalani Sitake's style. So if you're expecting to go to Lavelle Edwards Stadium tomorrow evening and watch BYU absolutely demolish Portland State, yeah, they'll get out to a big lead and then they'll sit on it. So that's why it feels anticlimactic to me, is that, yes, I'm looking forward to seeing how Bear Bachmeier performs running this BYU offense. I'd like to see him air it out a few times, and I fully expect that Aaron Roderick, he will run plays that he wants to see a guy like Bear Bachmeier run. He wants to get a feel for, okay, what's this kid comfortable with? What is he capable of operating? They're going to look at all of that. And we talked about that extensively on yesterday's podcast with the simplified play calling that they implemented this offseason being a major advantage for a kid like Bear taking over as BYU starting quarterback. But once again, let's say by the middle of the second quarter, let's say BYU's rolling, they're up 35-0. Kalani Sitake would call off the dogs, and essentially it'll devolve into the LJ Martin, Sione Moa, Jovessa Demuni, on down the list, whoever plays at running back for BYU, they'll run the football. So I hope you can understand that I am super excited to have BYU football back, but I'm also looking at it saying, man, by the middle of the third quarter, I could be taping my eyelids open to keep from falling asleep in this game. Maybe I'm wrong about that. And maybe it does prove to be one of those wake-up call games like it was in 2017. It could be that. But I think the bigger point to be had here is I'm looking forward to seeing what Bear Bachmeier does at the helm of the BYU offense. I just sincerely hope that, maybe it's false hope, that Kalani Sitake goes out there and kind of goes away from his nature and really lets BYU loose, lets them do their thing, play a full 4 quarters, and tell Portland State, no offense, but we've got to really see what this offense can do for an entire game. And you guys are the sacrificial lamb that just happens to be collecting a check along the way here. If I had my druthers, and many of you know that are longtime everydayers on this podcast, know that I do not like FCS games in the regular season. I believe they should be moved elsewhere in the calendar, whether it is as a spring game, or I've had some other propositions that you make it essentially a joint practice during training camp to break up the monotony of what that this month of August has been for a lot of these programs, where you get 2 or 3 weeks deep and you're just sick of one another. Well, bring an FCS team and play a scrimmage that you still pay them their game check. The bigger point is, this is the type of game that it's the perfect scenario for Bear Bachmeier and this BYU offense to settle in. But I also am concerned that Kalani Sitake will call off the dogs too soon, and we won't really get a full feel for what BYU can do really until next week when Stanford comes to town. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that he, like I said, he goes against what his established nature has been in his 10 years now as BYU football head coach. But telling me that the line for FanDuel, I think it was at 43.5 points, I'm hard-pressed to believe that BYU will exceed that if you're taking the over on that line for BYU, because it's just, like I said, it goes counter to what I know about Kalani Sitake's nature and what history tells us of how he operates in these games. But, hey, I'm looking forward to it all the same. I'll be there at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. If you guys are going to be tailgating, you're going to be doing something before the game, I've got a lot more free time on my hands. I'm not doing a radio pregame show anymore. I do plan, I'm going to try this out tomorrow. We're going to do a live pregame show. So call it my new radio pregame. We're going to do a pregame. We'll do a YouTube live. You can join up, have comments. We can have interaction live on the show. I don't know, when should we do that? I don't know. Maybe like 3:00. So I got time to get down to Lavelle Edwards Stadium, but we'll still do a live pregame show. Let you know my kind of game day thoughts on the matter. And then off to the stadium we go to watch BYU and Portland State play. And in theory, watch BYU run roughshod over the Portland State Vikings and improve to 1-0. And yeah, like I said, ultimately end up top 25 ranked, because at least Boise State's going to drop out of the rankings, because when you get absolutely demolished by USF, you're going to drop. All right. So coming up next, rather than really try and make you guys get a feel for like what the inside out of what the Portland State game is, because honestly, there's not a lot to break down. BYU should thoroughly dominate this game. The defense should feast on Barney Ball. It doesn't have the same talent it once had at Portland State. And offensively, you look at Portland State, they played 3 different quarterbacks last week. None of them are really that effective. They have a wildcat package. I think BYU will be very eager to sniff out, but I just look at this as a major opportunity for BYU to, run some things, get a full feel, hopefully, for how things are operating, but at the same time, for how long will they have that long leash? When will Kalani Sitake rein things in? And that's the concern I have, is we really won't get a full feel for this BYU team. But hey, one can hope. But coming up next, we're going to make bold predictions instead. Stuff that I believe is going to play out this season. I'm going to put it on the record right now. They will be those so-called receipts that you guys can throw back in my face when inevitably some of them are wrong. But we're going to do them all the same and put them on the record next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, it's college football season, everybody. It's my favorite time of the year. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's literally nothing like it. The best part is you get to enjoy all of that, but the tough flip side of it, it can be really tough to get games. In fact, it can be like the toughest part than the entire game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, and obviously stuff being tacked on when you're trying to get the tickets out to the game. That's why I encourage you guys to use our friends over at Game Time. It is the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best price with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay, and I can speak from experience. I have used Game Time. And the best part I love about it is you're not getting to the checkout screen, and all of a sudden they tack on fee after fee after fee. You know exactly what the price is because it's right there in the app. I also love the fact they made it super simple. You can see the exact view of your seat right there in the app, and you're off to the game, and they're making it as simple as they possibly can. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that I've bought tickets, and I've bought a fair amount of tickets in my life. So take a guesswork out of buying your tickets for college football with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, download Game Time today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope y'all are doing fantastic out there, wherever you're tuning in from. Looking forward to the BYU football season ahead. Do want to remind you guys that we have a survey ongoing right now with our friends over the Locked On Podcast Network. If you go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey, you can get entered to win for a chance to win up to 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. And this is your chance to sound off on whatever it is about Locked On you like, you don't like, you think advertising's a way to, whatever you've got. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey and sound off today. And a big thank you in advance for your help with that. All right, let's talk BYU football for the season ahead. I have got 5 bold predictions. Now, could all 5 of them fail and you throw them back in my face at the end of the year? Absolutely. But at the same time, that's the reason we do this. That's the reason I do this podcast. I do it every day. Trust me, I got a lot of receipts out there that have been thrown back in my face over the years. So let's get to them. Number 1, LJ Martin will be a 1,000-yard rusher for the BYU football program. And I guess the side note to this is I believe that Sione Moa also will be north of 500 yards on the year. So between the 2 top running backs for BYU, they should have 1,500 yards and change, in my opinion. Now, that requires both of these guys who have had injury concerns in the past to stay healthy. That is a key for BYU is keeping guys upright, especially at the running back position. The best thing BYU can do for a guy like Bear Bachmeier is have a strong, stout running game to take some of the pressure off of his shoulders. And that falls a lot in due part on the shoulders of LJ Martin and Sione Moa and everybody else on the depth chart. Jovesa Demuni. Who else we got? Who am I thinking of? We also have Enoch Nawahine. You look at the different guys on this roster, those running backs, they have got to shoulder the load and help a guy like Bear Bachmeier settle in. But I do believe that LJ Martin stays healthy. He's going to be one of the premier backs in this conference, and he will be north of 1,000 yards, and fingers crossed, it all goes according to plan. Number 2 bold prediction for the season. I believe that Bear Bachmeier will be the starter for all 12 or whatever games BYU plays this year. I think BYU is fully intent, and I say that with the caveat that if he gets injured, that changes the whole calculus. But if Bear Bachmeier is healthy, I predict he will start every game BYU plays this season. I think that they are fully intent on going all in on him and trying to get as much out of him as they can and really starting to get a glimpse at what his potential, his upside, everything about him as a quarterback can be. And they're going to give him a longer leash than I think many of you might expect, even if he struggles in some of these games. Maybe I'm crazy about that. And maybe it is that he plays 5 games, he's completely ineffective, and they move to McCae Hillstead. But I believe if he is healthy, that caveat needs to be added in there. If he is healthy, he will play every game and start every game for BYU this season. Number 3, Jack Kelly has put it on the record. He said it on this very podcast. I interviewed him at Big 12 Media Days, and I asked him, what personal goals do you have for yourself? He said, I want to get double-digit sacks. So that's north of 10 sacks. The last time BYU had a double-digit sack artist is Bronson Kafusi, and that's what, 10 plus years ago that Bronson had that 10 plus sack season. It has been a hot minute since BYU has had any individual player have that many sacks in a year. I believe that Jack Kelly absolutely will get it done. And the reason I believe that is we are hearing from guys like Jay Hill, BYU's defensive coordinator, that says they're going to shake up how they kind of go about their base defenses. There's going to be some odd fronts. Well, when you have an odd front, you have to use a linebacker or two to really help the numbers of the line of scrimmage. And that's where Jack Kelly, I think those extra reps at the line of scrimmage are going to give him that opportunity to go north of 10 sacks. He will be playing a hybrid defensive end linebacker role in some of those sets. And that will allow him to play closer to the line of scrimmage and, more importantly, rush the passer, which he is a very, very good pass rusher. And I believe that he absolutely will exceed 10 sacks this year. It's been a minute. Like I said, it's been more than a decade since BYU has accomplished that, but I do think that he can do that. And if he does it, I also think BYU as a team is going to have a whole lot more havoc created in opposing backfields. And I hope that he really realizes that goal because it's only going to make BYU's defense that much better. Bold prediction number 4 on the defensive side of the football as well. I predict that BYU will once again be in the top 10 in the country in interceptions. Now, they led the country a season ago. Remember, they were the number 1 team in takeaways, especially interceptions. It was a 22 across the season last year. They had an interception in literally every game they played a season ago, including the bowl game against Colorado. Do I predict that they're going to be the number 1 team in the country once again? No, but I do believe BYU will be top 10 in takeaways, particularly interceptions this season. The way that Jay Hill's defense operates is it bakes you into making some poor throws, and then they're going to feast on that. Do they have the same top-end cornerbacks that they had a season ago? TBD. I think Maury Bomba and Evan Johnson are very capable. I think Trey Alexander, Jonathan Cabella, when he's available, they're all capable players. But the bigger point to be had is I think BYU still has good enough talent to be in the top 10 in the country. And going kind of right in line with the Jack Kelly 10-sack thing, if BYU has double-digit interceptions as a team, because that would put them in the top 10 in the country if they're 15+, that would be a defense that, once again, is absolutely ferocious, but I really do think this defense is elite. While the offense may have taken a bit of a step back with a freshman quarterback, I do think this defense is more than capable of holding down the fort to help that offense out, and they're very capable of that a season ago, and I think they'll be no less capable this year, especially with some upgrades they added, particularly on that defensive line that, in theory, should make quarterbacks more uncomfortable and more prone to throw some passes that go awry, and you take advantage of that. All right, final prediction, bold prediction for me is that I believe that Will Ferrin will emerge as an All-American kicker. Now, that may not be all that bold, but kickers are, and kicking in general in college football, it's a bit of a fickle thing. There's a reason why there's a hashtag on social media of college kickers, because traditionally, college kickers just screw it up. They make life hard for opposing teams. But I think that Will Ferrin, he is absolute nails. And if you saw the video, the Deep Blue that BYU TV put out this week with him, I think it gives you some insight into how he operates. He is a very cerebral guy, and he's doing everything within his power to be the best kicker he can be. And I think so long as he stays within himself, BYU gives him ample opportunities, I think he is going to be an All-American at the kicker position. Now, there have been some preseason accolades that have listed him as such, second and third team and the like. But I really do think that Will Ferrin, he is absolute nails. And so long as he sticks to his guns, to use that expression, I absolutely believe that he is capable of being an All-American and will make special teams, yet again, just more of a weapon than it was for BYU last season. Special teams were absolutely, pardon the pun, special for the Cougars in 2024. I think Will Ferrin will lead the way there. And I'm not saying that it doesn't extend to guys like Sam Vanderhaar or in the return game, guys like Cody Hagan, Parker Kingston, etc. But I do think that Will Ferrin, he's going to become a household name more than he already is. And I think he will end up as an All-American this season. And I could be wrong, but at the same time, I am very, very comfortable in saying that, because that kick against Utah in particular, the smile, I think it said everything we need to know about this guy. Is he is a cool cucumber under pressure, and he goes out there and he does his job. He does his job to the best of his ability. And so long as, like I said, BYU puts him in a position to succeed, I think the Cougars are going to do just fine. And I said it before. I said it last week. I said I'm going to predict the season. I said a 9-3 record with a freshman quarterback. It's going to set BYU up for some pretty strong projections in 2026 and beyond, and I still stick to that. I think 9-3 is where I'm sitting, and if they exceed it, great. If they go below it, so be it. But I think that those are where I'm going to stand on BYU, and if I'm dead wrong about them, we'll revisit it in December, and we'll have some laughs at my expense. But as always, appreciate your guys' patronage and holding me to account, because trust me, there's a number of you who do it, and I don't mind it. I'm not saying it's a negative thing, because I should be held accountable for what I say. If I'm going to come out in here and put hot takes, if you want to call it that, out there on the internet, guess what? I better be able to be capable of eating the crow if and when I'm wrong about them. But I sincerely hope I'm right about all 5 of those projections. All right, coming up next, it's your guys' time to shine. Your guys, speaking of our insiders group, responded en masse with a lot of good questions. Bag segment, a lot of them related to Portland State, a lot of them related to the season ahead, but also some off the wall ones, and we'll get to all of them next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Upside. Are you still paying full price for gas, everybody? Stop leaving money behind and get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. You can use our limited time promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. That's 25 cents, everybody. You make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. And obviously, you're probably thinking it's too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out at any time to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon or many other brands. No matter how you want it, they'll take care of you guys. So do not let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app using the promo code, our limited time promo code FOOTBALL, for an extra 25 cents per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL, and offers do vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for the latest terms and conditions. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not signed up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, what are you waiting for? I'm passing along insider details on BYU sports that you guys can't find anywhere else. And the best part is it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. If you want to be a part of it, join at the link below in the show notes, or reach out to us via social media or email, and we'll get you squared away. But it's a 14-day free trial and just $4.99 a month to be a part of the Insiders Group, and hope that you guys will be considering joining as we get ready for the true kickoff to the season, literally tomorrow, everybody. We've made it 240 some odd days, and it's right here. It's the manna from heaven as football returns to our lives. All right, let's get into the mailbag, though, and answer the questions that you want to talk about. Speaking of our Locked On Cougars Insider Group members, they responded with a lot of good questions. We're going to start off with Luke. He says, Jake, why hasn't BYU gone after Treyson Bessinger, the quarterback out of Kaysville and Davis High School? It seems like he'd be the ideal fit for Roderick at 6'5", 210 pounds, and obviously since Keneal Sweetwine decommitted recently. Luke, to answer your question, I'm not 100% certain why they haven't. Now, Treyson Bessinger, to be clear, is currently verbally committed to Boise State. And if you have watched Treyson play in the last couple of games, he has got a big arm. He's a big body, as you mentioned, 6'5", 210 pounds. He's a prototypical quarterback. Now, I wish I had some more insight as to why BYU hasn't pursued him, but looking at BYU's history of quarterbacks, I do wonder, this is from my vantage point, there's some concern that Treyson Bessinger doesn't have the wheels, the foot speed that BYU wants in their quarterbacks. Because I know that Keneal Sweetwine has it. We can see it with Bear Bachmeier. You've obviously the guys that BYU's recruited recently have got some pretty capable feet to be able to be a dual threat quarterback. I do wonder if that's just the one thing that may be holding them back. Now, could that change very quickly? Absolutely. And we'll see what happens, but I do not have a good answer for you on that. Next one, Byron. I expect BYU to run all day over Portland State, but don't you think it's more important to have our quarterback throw the ball quite a bit to get reps in a real game? I keep hearing may only throw 20 passes. It doesn't make much sense to me. This game isn't about winning. We're going to win big. This game should be about allowing our freshman quarterback to get into the rhythm throwing a football. Do you agree? While I agree, I think I addressed it earlier, that I just don't think that Kalani Sitake is going to allow him to air it out as much as you or I may want them to. That's just the simple fact of the way that BYU has operated in these FCS games. Would I like to see him absolutely run their tried and true plays and really get a feel for what he's comfortable with? Yeah, I think they should, and they should do that early, because at some point, Kalani's going to call off the dogs, and then it will devolve into power left, power right, inside zone here, outside zone there. I joked with our Insiders Group earlier this week, and those of you who are in the Insiders Group, remember the text I sent you guys. I said, if I were BYU, I'd run exactly 4 plays: inside zone, outside zone, mesh, and all goes. Now, I think it'll be more well-rounded than that, but you could be as vanilla as you want in this game. That is one thing also BYU will be. They're pretty vanilla as well. And I do think that will kind of preclude some of the airing out that maybe you want to see from Bear Bachmeier. Eric says, I saw the SEC's new scheduling rule where each team has 3 protected matchups every year. If the Big 12 did the same thing, which teams would you want to see BYU play every year? And Damien asked the same question, essentially. Would you address it on the air as to who you would pick if your 3 protected games for BYU on an annual basis? Now, Eric did add that he wants to see Utah, Baylor, and ASU. Not bad. I actually think those 3 are very, very strong. But I will just say this. I said this to Damien in the text we had back and forth. I think the 3 would be Utah, ASU. I think those are inevitable. Utah and Arizona State. And then it's a trade-off, either Colorado or Arizona. And the reason I say one of those 2 teams is BYU wants as much regional travel as possible, because more fans show up, obviously less wear and tear on the bodies traveling, and they're in the mountain time zone. So as much as it would be cool to have Baylor be a part of that trio, I think it's one of the other mountain time zone teams you end up picking in that circumstance. Sorry to disappoint if that disappoints you. Kent says, is there any way that Kalani Sitake will finally run up the score due to the fact that we have a young freshman quarterback, or will he take his foot off the gas? I think I already answered that question for you, Kent, but he did add, I have a wild prediction, though. He says, 3 interceptions and 2 fumbles recovered by the defense, and Bear throws for 395 yards and 3 touchdowns. I'm calling my shot right now. Okay, here's the thing, Kent. If they get those stats, 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles, Bear is near 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, BYU's winning that game, 49-0 at the minimum? I'm just saying. Reagan also says, Bear Bachmeier stat line for the game, what will it be? He's saying, speaking of Reagan, 15 of 25, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, 85 rushing yards, and another TD. So 3 total TDs, roughly 300 yards in total offense. So that pales in comparison to what Kent's projecting. I'm more inclined to say that Reagan, I think your numbers are more in line with what I'm thinking. I think those rushing yards for him are actually going to be smaller than that, just because you don't want to risk him against the likes of Portland State. We don't have to look any further than the broken back that Riley Nelson suffered. It was in 2011, 2012, when he had that Weber State hit him. He wasn't wearing the rib protector because he liked to show off the abs at the time. Remember, he broke his back. There were like the little wings on your spine that he ended up fracturing. That was a really tough thing. You don't want to risk a quarterback in a game like this. Jeff also asked the final stat line for tomorrow. His projection is 300 plus yards and 2 TDs for Bear. He says that LJ and Sione are over 100 yards each, Chase and JoJo over 100 yards each, and the defense gets 5 sacks. Woo! That'd be a pretty impressive stat line. I will say this, the stat line for me, I do think that Bear gets 200 yards passing. I'd say somewhere around like 50 yards rushing, maybe. I do think that BYU, if they put their mind to it, will run for 300 plus yards in this game. That absolutely will get LJ and Sione, I think, in the realm of 100 yards each, but also allows Jovesa Damuni, Enoch Nawahine, Preston Rex, and the like at running back to get extra reps as well. So keep an eye on that. And then defensively, I'm so hard pressed to say like 5 sacks. I have a hard time with that. I do think they come away with at least an interception or 2. It's just inevitable. It feels like the way that Portland State played against Tarleton State, it lends itself to BYU being able to do that. So I do think they come away with some takeaways. So that's what I'll predict there. Tyson asks, what is your biggest fear for the season, offensively and defensively? Biggest fear for offense is that BYU has ineffective quarterback play across the roster. That is my fear. If you have ineffective quarterback play, look at no further than Brendan Sorsby last night for Cincinnati. If he were any more of a threat throwing the football, Cincinnati easily could have won that game. And they came close to it, but 69 yards passing, that's not going to get it done. And that's my concern for BYU offensively. Defensively, mass injuries. If injuries hit, the injury bug hits BYU, that's my concern for defense. They stay healthy, for me just fine. But the injury bug is always something I'm concerned about. Tate, I know that Tiger returned punts and kicks at Stanford. You think he'd split reps with Hagan or Parker to do that? I do think he could, and he likely will. Tiger Bachmeier is a very, very capable return man. In fact, he was a freshman All-American doing that at Stanford 2 years ago. So I do think he absolutely will be in the mix there for both punt and kick return, and I do think that he will be able and should be contributing in that realm. Jason said, my mailbag question is, do you think we're going to see Bear air it out a few times in this game and more short routes and a healthy dose of Martin and Moa in this game? I think all of the above. Aaron Roderick's offense is predicated upon run, deep shots. It's just at least 1 a quarter. It's the philosophy that his offensive coordinator in college, remember, it's Norm Chow's philosophy, to air it out at least once a quarter to make the defense think twice about sneaking too far upfield to really slow you guys down. So there will be short routes. There will be intermediate routes, but there will be deep shots. They will allow Chase Roberts, JoJo Phillips, Parker Kingston, whoever else to go deep, and they'll huck it. They'll throw it down there and see what they can do. Does it always end up working? No. In fact, I think that's less than a 50% completion rate, but you're trying to give the defense that thought in their head, hey, could they go deep on us here? That's what you'll see. All right, Matthew, what are your initial thoughts about ECU? Now, East Carolina fell behind early in this game, and a certain somebody, you know who you are, texted me and said, hey, maybe your prediction about that being a tough game for BYU is wrong. I still think it's a dangerous game traveling 2 time zones all the way to play is it Greenville, right, for East Carolina. And they did almost come back. Now, their clock management late in that game against North Carolina State, absolutely abysmal. But I do think it's an easier game looking at it from at least one game's perspective from what they did against NC State. But they made it snug late. So I still can't overlook ECU, especially with the travel element involved. All right, and then we'll finish off here with Donovan, and it's the best question because it's the one you've been waiting for. I make you wait the entire podcast for my score predictions. It says, Jake, how well do you think the BYU will do against Portland State, and what do you think the final score will be? And I'll put it on the record right now. I have got a final score of BYU 48, Portland State 3. Now, that would cover that line from a FanDuel, but I'm so wary of Kalani Sitake calling off the dogs early. But I do think that Portland State is so overmatched in this game that I do think they'll get a field goal late in this one. They'll find some way against maybe the 3s or 4s on defense for BYU, because I do think that they will empty the benches for BYU in this game. But 48-3. That's where I'm standing. Maybe I'm crazy for saying that. Maybe you think I'm too low on that, but we'll see how it all plays out tomorrow night. But as always, thank you so much for your guys' support. I absolutely love doing this podcast. So yeah, plan on like 3 o'clock Mountain Time tomorrow. So it'll be 5 o'clock Eastern for those who are on the East Coast, 2 o'clock Pacific Time. And Hawaii, is that 3 hours behind? The point is, we'll do a live show. Why not? Let's give it a shot. This is going to be kind of new territory for me. I've done BYU pre and post game shows for my radio station for almost a decade now, and they've changed some of the format, and I'm not going to be doing a pregame show anymore. So I've got more time to kill, and we'll give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. So plan on 3 o'clock Mountain Time tomorrow for a live edition of Locked On Cougars. We'll call it the pregame edition of Locked On Cougars. As always, thank you, though, for all of your support. You guys are absolutely the best. Cannot thank you guys enough for continuing to be with us literally every single day. So as I often say with my sign-off now, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and come back tomorrow and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.